we're just going to go straight into it. Okay.
Okay.
Aun Abdi, 1 minute book review, founder and host. For a living, you're actually a business analyst.
Indeed, I am.
And you are a very, very successful podcaster, and I'm going to call you a book reviewist.
Okay. I don't know if that's an official term in the Oxford Dictionary.
Well, you're more intellectual than I am. Okay, on that one. Certainly, you've read more books than I have.
On the gram, we're called bookstagrammers.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So let's kick off with what is, if I can call it, OMBR.
OMBR is 1 minute book review, and all the time I get the question, how did you start it? From people now, as they see the channel growing and the community growing, I get messages daily from people who are like, oh, I want to start my own channel, I want to reach out to people, I want to share my message and talk about the books and ideas and things like that. And the thing I always say to them is, the way I started was, I've always been big into reading as a kid. As a kid, though, I was more into fiction. So I was into, reading books about, Robert Muchamore and your classics like the Roald Dahls, all that kind of stuff as a kid. And then I studied English at A level. And, that passion for reading's always been there. But I started this channel when I was commuting into London, and I was doing 2 hours a day. Round trip was 4 hours a day, so 2 hours each way to South Croydon, a wonderful part of the world. And there I kind of had 4 hours in a day to be like, well, what am I going to use this time for? And around that time, I was like, well, how can I fill this time? And I think I just came across a book on my shelf, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to do this. And then I read the book in the first couple of weeks. I read the book Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And I was like, how can I do something with the book stuff? And, I'm quite passionate about it and learning about it. And the 1 minute book review I did just came straight into my head, like within, I want to say 5 seconds, like it just popped into my mind. I'm like, Instagram had a limit of 1 minute. And I was like, 1 minute book review, no one's doing this. So I furiously typed in on Google 1 minute book review. And then I saw that there was no one there. And I was like, I've got this, I'm doing this. So I set up my page, and we're here. I don't know how many years later. I was probably at the back end of 2017, and then I did that pretty much since then. But I think I took about 9 months off last year, and I didn't really post anything for 9 months or so, just because there's other stuff going on. But now I've started to get back into it, and we've seen some real growth really the last 4 or 5 months. So
yeah, I mean, 35,000 followers.
Yeah,
with a handful of following.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. Like yesterday was the most surreal moment. So yesterday, I got an audio message from Robin Sharma.
Oh yeah.
So Robin Sharma is, for those people who don't know, is an author and motivational speaker. And I put out a poll for my followers about like my quarantine list, and his book came up first. And I basically just tagged him in it, like I always do to all the authors. And I was in a meeting call for work, and I saw on my notifications, I was like, Robin Sharma has sent you an audio message. I'm like, oh. And part of me was thinking he's going to come back to me and be like, oh, you've plagiarized my thing, you haven't tagged me. I thought he was going to send to Instagram to get me like taken off. And I listened to the audio message, and he was like, I love what you're doing with your channel, spreading the word and positivity during this time. And it was a really nice message that I got from him. And that was a big kind of like, oh my God, he actually sent me an audio message. And I think he has 1 million followers or something on Instagram or something crazy like that. And he put me on his story. And I was just like, oh, this is crazy. The world of the internet, And
it's interesting. I mean, how do you feel being in the position that you're in?
That's a very good question. I think I feel very happy that the things that I'm sharing with people, they get a lot of value from it. I think a lot of people come at it with the wrong angle, especially when posting stuff, is they don't come at it with the angle of delivering value. And I've always come up with the angle of delivering value and giving as much value as I can to my followers. And I get so many messages from people saying, thank you for giving me this recommendation. It's changed my mindset. Thank you for the things that you talk about, because I think it's really important. And I think that for me is definitely what I try and focus on, is making sure that the people who follow me and listen to me are getting as much value as they can, because it's an attention game at the end of the day. Is the things that you're putting out, is there's, especially now with everyone inside, there's so many people making content, there's so many people putting their messages out there, is how can you deliver the most content that you can during that specific time. So that, I think, is what I try and focus on, really. And yeah, it's been crazy the last couple of weeks.
How does it make you feel?
It makes me feel good, obviously, that people message me. Like, I get up in the morning and I answer all my 50 or so messages. That I have 55 messages outstanding at the moment, and I wake up and a majority of my followers are international. So I get up in the morning and I've got another 40 waiting for me as I get up. So it's nice, because people ask me questions like, I need tips to read faster, I need tips for this book. They keep on sending me their books, and unfortunately I can't read everyone's book. But
so you're like a what is it, a KPI in your interest, in your industry, by Daniel Priestley.
Yes, key person of influence.
Yes,
shout out to Daniel Priestley.
Yeah.
Yes, I so the whole thing for me is I want to be a medium for people to get access to books, or to get information about books. See, for me, I always wanted someone to be like, this is the books that you should read for these specific topics, whatever that might be. And there wasn't that person out there. So you have your Tim Ferrisses, you have your Ryan Holidays, you have your Lewis Howes, all that kind of stuff, who interview authors and do that kind of stuff. But they go across the board, so they speak to everyone. Majority of the time they are authors and they are promoting a book, but I wanted to be specifically book related with the kind of people I talk about. And I think the way that I've approached it, and the way that I want to feel about it, is that I am contributing to people to read more. That is like my main goal, is I want to be there for people who perhaps are beginning to read and they don't know where to start. And then I'm that introduction for this journey that will take them to many, many places and speaking to many, many people. So I want to be that first step for them to be like, yes, I don't know what books to read. Where can I go?
Do you view this as a business?
So my approach to this is a platform for a business in the future, but I don't see myself as an influencer, as a business. So my goal, and my goal from the start was, and I got this goal very early, was to use this as a platform to gain following for the eventual publishing of my own book, whatever that might be. I have a couple of ideas at the moment, and I'm working towards one at the moment. And then using that as a platform, my following as a platform, to then bridge the gap between authors and readers. So my idea is that first book would be self-published, and it'll be under my own publishing company. Now that publishing company would then obviously gain revenue, hopefully, from that book and gain traction and that kind of stuff. And they'll use that as further investment to get authors into my publishing company, and then they start publishing their books. So my goal as a business is to have a publishing company. That goal has been there from the start. But I have thought, well, what's the best way to go about that? Now, still having a job and still studying as a business analyst, that is obviously priority in the short term. And the thing that I don't have is capital. So I can't go and put £50,000 into creating a publishing company. But I think the best thing to do for me, and this is what I learned from Gary Vaynerchuk and these kind of people, is gain that following and gain that trust for 3, 4, 5 years. And then once you're in a position to be like, okay, I want to save up some capital, get some interest, because you never know who you might meet. You might find business partners who want to invest money, and you never know who you're going to meet. So, but having an audience and having a following has been my main goal. And I've always approached that with try and start the conversation, like always be the one to start the conversation. So whether that's approaching people and being like, this is a great post, and just engaging in conversation as much as you can, rather than just going about it as in, I make this content, put it out there, and wait for people to come to me. I think initially I started off with that mindset of just posting and then seeing what happens. Now I'm much more on the side of engaging I mean, you probably see my post and be like, he's posting quite a bit, but I spend, I want to say, 5 times more engaging with people than I do actually posting or spending time on Instagram is just engaging with people as much as I can and having a conversation and building up that rapport and trust, which I think is so important, because if people don't trust what you're saying, and then the whole relationship is off. And if once I lose that trust with someone, I think it's very difficult maybe to get that back. And like I said to you earlier, it's a attention thing. If they don't feel like they're getting value from me, they'll go to someone else. So that's my main
and I think the advantage you have at the moment is that you're in a unique space in what you're doing. I mean, there are other people, I guess, who do reviews, but the way you do it, and I think your personality is quite engaging. I just wanted to say one thing about to the listeners about your commitments to not only to the 1 minute book review, but as you said, you're a business analyst. You are looking to complete CIMA, which is a professional accounting qualification.
Precisely. Yes.
So you're doing a job, you're doing that qualification, and you're a level 2 PT looking to complete level 3.
Yes.
That's quite a, and running this potential organization that you're building, and it's a fantastic
1 Minute Books Limited.
Yeah, it's a vision, and it's an awesome vision. How do you? Well, before I come back to that point, I think there's one thing I want to ask you is, you've talked about how you feel about it, and you've talked about potentially what it gives you in terms of that satisfaction and fulfillment and affinity with your followers and your audience. What's your why?
Good question, Simon Sinek.
Yes.
That's a very good question. And it's one I ask myself on a daily basis. I think after reading that book, it definitely triggered that questioning in my mind. As you've probably seen from my website and on the mission statement, education has always been a big part of my goal with this. I remember when I spent 2 months teaching in China after my second year at university. I spent 2 months teaching in a English summer camp in Guangzhou in southern China. And ever since I taught there, I kind of had this inkling towards doing something that was related to education, whatever that might be. And that was always in the back of my mind. And when this came up, I was like, this is a great opportunity to go down that road. So I would always use that publishing company as a way to foster education, particularly in lower developed countries, wherever that might be, specifically war-torn countries, especially because I get so many messages from people to say they don't have access to books, they don't have the money to afford them, do they have the PDF copies, that kind of stuff. I personally think that the publishing game will change in 5 to 10 years once people now have access to the internet that they didn't have before. That does not mean they will have access to hard copies. However, I believe that the amount of people that message me and say, do you have this as a PDF? Do you have this as an ebook? Now, once a publishing company gets the rights to a book and they have it on a PDF, there's no extra cost of someone buying that for $1 or for $2 to the company because they already have it as a digital form. Now, they can sell that for, let's say a book is £10, for example, a hard copy, and they sell it for £1. So it's 10% of the price. But for that person in that country, that's a bargain, and they have that as a book and they can read it on their phone. So for me, that's the goal, is to make it accessible to everyone. Now, I think the traditional publishing model will change in time as people get access to the internet, because you need to find a better way to distribute books. Now, we're seeing with what's going on at the moment with the coronavirus, people, for instance, the model might change in the sense that people can't ship or they can't get into other countries because of customs, but the internet's the internet. If you had it as a downloadable link or as a PDF, you can have your books available to everyone. Now, I don't know why publishing companies haven't done this. Like, I don't understand why Penguin hasn't gone, do you know what, we have all these books here. Why can't we just get it into a PDF copy and then put it on our website and people can download it and pay like $1 or $2? I think they can increase their revenue by a lot of money, just for people. And then it'll give more people access to books. For instance, I think this book, I paid like £12 for it. So it's 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson as a hard copy. Now, for me, that's not a big deal. but for someone else, paying £12 is a big deal to pay for a book, which they might not have the same passion as I do. Now it's about reducing that barrier to entry for me. Like, that's my why. It's reducing that barrier to entry for people who don't have access to books. How do you reduce that barrier to entry? You make it available as much as you can on the internet and ebooks and PDFs. I get so many messages daily from people who are like, do you have this as a PDF? Do you have this as an ebook? And they actually want to buy books from me. There's so many people who are like, do you sell this? Do you sell this? And I'm like, sorry, I don't. And that has to be, that's always in my mind. It's like, how can I put myself in a position where people trust me so that when I'm in a position for them to buy an ebook or buy a PDF, they'll always come to me and be like, yes, I trust him. I trust what he's doing and his vision. And I think that is my why. And that's like, I don't see it as a way to garner attention for me as a personality. Like, I've never seen it as, you have those people who go out and see it as a way to garner like advertisements or that kind of stuff. And yes, potentially that might be in the future, but I never see it as me being the goal for it. Like, it doesn't end with me. Yeah. I see it as a lot bigger than me and my own personality and my personal goals.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you say that, because I just wanted to delve into this a little more deeper, because the why, I've discovered very recently myself through Simon Sinek's books, and I think he's wonderful. He's one of my favorite people who I follow. The Golden Circle and everything else, and the Friends exercise, and finding your why.
Yes.
And it's turned, in your case, do you think that where you're going with the 1 minute book review and your end goal, semi-end goal is the publishing business, does your why sit in line with where you want to travel towards, and the other things that you're doing in terms of your professional qualifications, and does that also sit in that why?
Yes, exactly. I think if, for instance, my qualification didn't sit within that, or the PT thing that was more of a thing that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was at a position, I was talking about that period of 9 months where I didn't post, and I was kind of in between things, and I was going through some personal things, and I was like, well, do I want to do the finance? I quit my job and I started a new job, and do I want to do the finance and accounting, or do I want to do something else? Do I want to become a PT? So I started to do my PT qualification, and that's more like a side project. I don't see that as a career per se. I think it's always good to have options, and I see that as an option potentially. If I'm maybe doing something like a side business and I need some more income, I could potentially do more PT and have more money. So that's how I see it. I don't see it as a full-time career. I see it as a supplement income. But my qualification, I see as a great learning opportunity to learn about certain skills, or finance especially. Yeah. The obviously technical side of finance, but also the business side of finance. SEMA at the moment have changed their modules and they've changed their syllabus to show more digital finance. So they're getting to blockchain, all that kind of technologies. It's what we're learning about at the moment. So for me, it's perfect at the moment for the next year and a half or so that I've got left to study.
It kind of fits into your sort of your commercial sort of mindset that you need to run a business, for example.
Exactly. And obviously there's no substitute for doing it, but I think for me there's no rush in doing it, because I'm the firm believer that I think sometimes I don't want to rush into it. For instance, like I want to be comfortable and be in a position, because the way I see it is, if I get once I get my qualification and I'm in a better financial position, once that salary increases, I could use that extra income to supplement whatever I'm going to do. So although it's not something that I want to do now, it's something that will help me get to eventually where I want to go. So that's the way I see it. It's going to be like a stepping stone, whatever that might be. And plus, it's like a reputation thing. And it's like, okay, yes, he's got his Instagram channel, but he's also studied, and he's also got a full-time job, and he's also hopefully a chartered accountant. So it all helps in bringing the image and bringing that together, which is definitely on the forefront of my mind, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm talking about things. And so it's something I'm very conscious about, and I'm glad this has come up in conversation, is I talk about all these things in the books I've written, but the books that I read and all that kind of stuff, and it's very easy for me to come off as if I'm the one who has written them, but I'm not. I'm just the messenger for what other people have written, and I'm very conscious of the fact that's the fact. So I can't talk about other people's book as if they're my own, and that qualification and those qualifications and whatever I'm going to achieve in my own personal life is just credibility that hopefully helps. That's why, for instance, like a big thing for me once I've completed my qualification is to really commit myself to write that book, because I don't think I can legitimately say to people that I am wanting to do this, or I know what is good about a book if I haven't gone through the process myself, and I haven't done it myself, and I haven't put myself in a position that writers put them in. Like, I just don't feel like that's legitimate for me to come from that angle. So that's why it's always, and to be fair, I've always been big into writing. Like my subjects at A-level were all writing subjects, English, history, economics, and politics, and I studied politics at university, and that was basically 3 years of just writing, and that's always been a passion of mine. So yeah, it's all working together to get to that end goal.
Again, it's very interesting, because you talk about credibility, and especially in today's world, credibility and integrity is very much at the forefront of what people do. We're so exposed to on the internet, if we choose to go onto the internet and put ourselves out there. I guess from your perspective in terms of writing a book and then going down this road of a publishing house, but also if I guess credibility isn't required for investment. If you're looking at somebody to invest, and you've got this platform with say 100,000 or 200,000 followers, and you've started this publishing house, or the roots of a publishing house, that credibility also is very important, isn't it, for investment also?
Exactly. I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's very important from everything that I've read is there's always that linchpin of an organization. There's always that one person that takes that organization forward, whether it's your Bill Gates, your Steve Jobs. There has been examples from both of them, those two individuals leaving their companies for short or long periods of time, and you see a noticeable dip in performance of those companies. And I think it's very important, especially at the start, to have someone who is a credible person at the forefront of that organization. So that's why, for me, it's very important to constantly reaffirm to myself is going back to that why, because if I'm not answering why I'm doing it, and this goes down to every single post, like this goes to the granular level of every single post that I put out. Am I putting myself in that position that I want to be in 5 to 10 years? Because I think by revisiting that, then you're always reminding yourself. That's why, like, I try not to post anything that's too frivolous. I try my best, and if I don't have anything to post, like the other day I just didn't post anything. I mean, what's one day gonna do? I mean, it's not gonna make any difference anyway. And overwhelming, it is overwhelming at times. Like I'll talk about an example. I was recording last weekend, and I was trying to record a book review, and I don't, thank God, like I don't suffer from anxiety or that kind of stuff, but I had a borderline anxiety attack from recording. Like I couldn't even speak into the camera. I was like, I don't know what's happening right now, but like my heart's beating at 1,000 beats per minute, like, and I can't say, like, there's no words coming out my mouth. And I remember just staring at the camera for, I think, because I had it rolling, and I was just staring at it, and I'm like, I don't know how long it's been. So I had a look, and it had been like 10 minutes, and I hadn't said a word, and I was just staring at the camera, and no words. I had my notes. I had like a notebook. I had my notebook, and I had like what I wanted to talk about. No words were coming out my mouth, and I was just like, what is happening? like right now, and it's real. Like there's some people that think that you can just go through that, and part of me felt empathy towards the people who felt like that all the time, because I was like, that wasn't a nice feeling at all. And I was speaking to my mum about it, and I was like, she's like, are you all right? And I'm like, I think I just had a borderline anxiety attack. And it was a very new feeling for me, and one in which I was very grateful to have experienced, because I think there is definitely a feeling that people get when they constantly put themselves out there, is there is that anxiety. And I don't think it comes from the negative feedback that you've got, because touch wood, I don't really get that much negative feedback, because it's not really my opinions, really. It is my opinions about books, but it's books. I mean, what negative? I'm not talking about, you know, big political concepts or things like that. Sometimes I get negative comments, but they're just like, you just need to look at the camera more. I'm like, whatever, mate. But there is a real thing of getting overwhelmed, like by the comments and by the constant questions, and it is very real. And I've done a better job now of trying to balance my time as much as I can between doing things outside of it and then being on it. So for instance, every time I leave my room, I don't take my phone with me. Like I only have my phone in reply to comments really in my room. Like if I'm outside, if I'm out in the house or with other people, then I don't really take my phone with me. And I think having that separation between like, this is my room, so it's having that separation is really important, because I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by it.
You talk about not having anxiety, but you've tasted a little bit of it. Did you feel after you went through that experience a slightly heightened feeling of self-awareness?
Good question. I've always been a very self-aware person, and I attribute that a lot of the time to the things that I've read and my own personal things that I've read and religion or that kind of stuff.
Are you religious?
Yes, Muslim, and you know, I pray as much as I can, and I attribute that to a lot of the self-awareness. And I had an interesting discussion actually with Lucy Barnes, who's another bookstagrammer, and we have this, you know, dialogue between the two of us, and we have our own readers' insights on my YouTube channel where we discuss books and that kind of stuff. So I'm reaching out to other bookstagrammers and doing podcasts and stuff. And she is not a religious person, and we've been having debates and discussions about it, very open discussions, and they've been really great. And I attribute a lot of that self-awareness and perspective to the religious aspects of my life. And I think reading supplements that. And I think the misconception, if we're going to go a bit off topic, the misconception, especially with Islam, is people think that learning is not encouraged. They think like it is what it is and you follow it. This is from the discussion I had with Lucy. She was like, I don't realize there's this much emphasis put on learning. And I'm like, yes, like it's really encouraged for people to spend time learning, to become their own version of like a scholar, obviously not a formal scholar, but their own version of it. So it's constantly reading, constantly trying to get as much information as they can, constantly questioning. That mindset, I think, is very important. And I had that feeling, I want to say in my early 20s, when I started to really question it, and that was supplemented by reading more with these kind of books behind me. And I think the synergy between those two was really important for me, and having that. Going back to your early thing about getting self-awareness from the anxiety, I want to say definitely, because like I said, I've always kind of been self-aware, but I'm very grateful that I went through that experience. And it wasn't like a major experience where I didn't have a breakdown, but it was a very real feeling of being like, I can't get any words out my mouth. Like I can't, like brain to mouth to camera, which just not working. It just wasn't working. And that's when you just have to sit back and be like, maybe I'm trying, like I get it all the time where I get overwhelmed and I'm like, maybe I'm just doing too much. Like maybe, you know, with the study, with the job, with the books, maybe I'm just trying too much. Maybe I'm just doing too much. And I'm conscious about that. In the past, I maybe would have just worked through it. Now I'm like, if I'm in a position where I'm feeling those feelings, I might just take a step back and be like, maybe just, you know, take a couple of hours or maybe take just that half a day off just to clear your mind.
Did you ever have that kind of in your earlier part of your life when, you know, I guess less so at uni, more probably at school and growing up. Uh, did you have a sort of anxiety? Have you experienced it as a young lad?
My long-time memory is very bad. And I think it's mainly due to the fact that I don't like to remember most of that early life. But I think, especially at school, I think I was always very quiet. And I always go back to the story, and I've talked about this story a lot on my channel, is my mum went in to see a teacher because the teacher called my mum in to have a conversation about me. And my mum's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong with Aun?" She's like, "Well, there's nothing really wrong with Aun. It's just the fact that, there's other kids, once we're in break that, play with each other and, are playing. And Aun's just kind of sitting in the corner by himself, not really talking to anyone." And she's like, "Well," mum was like, "Well, is he upset? Is he angry? Like, how's he feeling?" He's like, "No, he's perfectly fine. He's just sitting playing by himself." And I listened to that and I'm like, that's so true. And that's just my personality now. Like, I can spend hours by myself and I'll be perfectly happy. Now, I have feelings perhaps when I was younger of maybe not anxiety, but definitely like shyness to the degree where I didn't like to speak. Like I'm people might see my videos and be like, "Oh, he likes to speak. He likes the sound of his own voice." I really don't. Like, I'm not really much of a speaker, as much as you can believe. But I think that comes from the fact that I don't like to come across in a certain way as too out there and to like the sound of my own voice, and I'm very conscious about that. But as a kid, I was much preferred just to sit back and listen, and I don't know whether that came from anxiety or shyness. I don't know the definition for that or where that came from, but it definitely for me was a fact of I just never really been much of the friend type or the social type or all that kind of stuff. I just like to kind of keep myself to myself. I don't know. I've never really explored where that's come from, but I think that's just ingrained into my personality now, where I don't attribute it to anxiety, because I feel like that's an actual condition where people really suffer from it. And thankfully I don't, but I have had experiences like I had the other day, but that's more induced by recording. It's not going about my daily life. Like, yeah. I've never had that feeling on my day-to-day life.
What when you were at school, what did you struggle with?
Everything. Earlier, I had this pre-GCSE. GCSEs is a form of.
Sorry, the reason I'm asking is I want your followers and listeners to understand that here's a guy who's achieving massive things, and it's possible for everyone and anyone to do this. That's why I want to hear your story.
Oh yeah, 100%. So when I was a young kid, I had to go to, my mum tells me this, I used to have to go to someone because I never used to talk. So my mum was worried that I couldn't ever talk or there was something wrong with me. So I had to go see someone to help my speech, to actually get me to start talking. That was a real thing. I suffered from dyslexia as a kid, and I'm still sort of battling that to a degree. So I get extra time in my exams, which is I'm very thankful for. 25% always helps. And when I was a young kid, I really struggled with school, and there's no doubt about it. Academically, yeah. Academically, I really struggled. I want to say up to 14, 15. Like, we have the common entrance exams, and I did terribly. Like, I want to say D's, E's, F's, like terribly. By the skin of my teeth, I got into secondary school, and it was between me and another guy. And the only reason why I got in was because I got like a higher grade in one subject, and that was the only reason why I got in. And I know that guy, and my mum's friends with the guy's mother, and seeing the differences between where we've ended up is kind of like, yeah, it's quite creepy, to be fair. And I look back at that road, that opportunity that I had, and I'm like, imagine if I was the other one. It makes me feel quite emotional, because I'm like, imagine if I didn't get that opportunity to go to that school that I went to. And yeah, I feel very thankful for that. one grade and that one teacher who Tim Wright.
Sometimes people have huge impacts, and they don't even know it on an individual, and especially usually it's a teacher or a professor. And
I have two people who I attribute a lot of my stuff to. Is one was that Latin teacher that I had at primary. I don't know whether you call it primary school, but prior to high school was Tim Wright, who was my Latin teacher, and he was a big influence on me as getting me into the mindset of, you know, you can do more with the stuff that you're doing. You know, don't settle for that. And that did help me. And he was quite a strict teacher, to be fair. And I think that's what I needed. I think lacking a figure at home was I needed someone to tell me what to do and be very forceful with me. And the other one was a maths tutor, Pauline Williams. I think it's Pauline Williams. And she, I mean, I remember a specific conversation that we had, and she was like, Aun, you have an option here. This is an opportunity to turn over a new leaf. Now, you either continue doing the same things that you're doing and you'll end up in the same places you are now, or you really get your act together and you make the changes that you need to make. And I remember sitting there, and it was a cold day in December. I'd just come from school and I was at her house. She had made some horrendously smelled food in her house. And I was just like, maybe this old lady's right. Maybe I need to get my stuff together. And yeah, I mean, I ended up getting like an A in my maths, and yeah, I think that was a big impact for me, going from the initial stages of schooling and going to my GCSEs and then doing well in my A-levels and then going to university. And I always look back at those two moments. I think they were very impactful for me, especially that conversation with Pauline. I think that's the one memory that stands out for me from my younger education. And I've always had teachers saying to me that, you know, I remember going through my old stuff and sorting out my room and looking at my old like report cards from secondary school, and it's always like, Aun's doing well, but he could focus more and he could do more. Like, it was always, every single subject was the same thing, is Aun's attentive, but he could be doing more. And it was always the but. There was always a but in there. There was always a and also. And I'm very aware of that now. And I think now looking back at it, I don't want anyone to be like, and also. Because I'm like, I want to do as much as I can so that report card doesn't say and also. It just says it. Like, that's just it. Yeah. And I think that's what drives me, is those conversations I had, especially from the negative teachers. Like that has, I think when I was a kid, I always zoned out. I think that was my way of dealing with it. I've never really been a sort of highly angered person. I've always been quite mellow and let things kind of water off a duck's back kind of thing. I think as I've got older, I've started to maybe use that as fuel to do stuff, that sort of anger, because I think it's there. I think everyone has it there.
Well, I think it's your winning formula. It is.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it is what is driving me at the moment. I think I've definitely got into a mindset in the last 6 months of personal stuff happening at the back end of 2018-ish. That was big fuel for change, and that was a, like, I feel like it's kind of, you're up against it, and who are you fighting at the end of the day? Are you fighting the things that people are saying about you, or are you fighting yourself? I don't know who said it, but there was someone that says, like, who is your hero? And your hero is whoever you are in 5 years. Like, who is your hero? It's you in 5 to 10 years. So for me, it's like, I have a strong vision, like from what I've told you, about what I want to do and who I want to be. And it's working towards that on a daily basis and it even goes down to the granular level as everything that I do, to a degree. Obviously not everything, but most of the things I do, is it working towards that? Is it related to that? Is it, you know, related to that why? Is it related to the position that I want to be in? And that's been my focus. And I think that early struggle at school is, I mean, you hear it from so many people who struggled at school, and they've come out the other side so much stronger. And obviously I'm not saying to kids obviously to purposely do it, because that's not, you shouldn't do that, but it's very real. And the discussions I have with people is reforming the education system, because I don't think it works for everyone. And that would be a big goal of mine, is working with people to reform the education system in a way that makes it, you know, good for certain individuals who perhaps don't thrive in it. And how can we make them thrive in it? And how can we make them learn as much as they can through that, or give them the skills? Like, I never through once in education did they give me the tools to be like, this is why you need to learn, or this is why you need to be someone who constantly wants to learn. Like, that was never a thing.
It's the why again, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that my why is driven by my own personal experiences. I think it's driven by the fact that I have been on the other side of teachers not on my side, and always battling it in school. And I've been very thankful to have great opportunities and gone to great schools, and I'm always thankful for that. And I want to make sure I'm doing as much as I can to make sure that kids had the same opportunities that I had. But at the same time, I think there's a better way that it can be done. And
one doesn't fit all, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's working with people who are a lot cleverer than I am to come up with a way to do that, because I think technology can play such a... I mean, I had a conversation with someone over Instagram earlier, and she was a teacher, and we were talking about ways that you could do Myers-Briggs testing for kids, like a children's version, and then finding, perhaps instead of doing classes based on ability, you do them based on their learning ways. So you have, for instance, you either have kids who are more visually conducive to learning, more audio-based learning, and you split classes based on that type of learning rather than sets, rather than how clever they are, what scores they're getting. You split it based on their ability to learn, perhaps. But obviously that could be a way to do it. But that's my goal at the moment, is definitely going down the education route, but then using obviously the publishing house, and to do obviously education material, to do non-fiction books, to do fiction books as well. Like, my personal thing is I want to read more fiction books, because I think, like, I'm reading a book at the moment which is The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. So storytelling is obviously very important in fiction writing, but it's as important as it is in non-fiction writing. And I think, as someone who wants to be a writer, I think it's important to understand, but storytelling happens in conversations, it happens in videos, it happens in your blogs, it happens with the way you just carry yourself and how you talk. So it's finding those principles, and I think that's definitely at the forefront of my mind.
Did you experience bullying at school?
Yes, I think I did. It wasn't abusive, but it was definitely racially driven. And it was a very fine line between being a bit of fun and being something that was actually quite hurtful. And I think that's perhaps why at times I kind of went into my shell a bit, because I didn't know how to react to it. I wasn't an angry kid, so I never really retaliated per se. I kind of just laughed it off and ignored them, which I feel like is the best way to go about it. And it's what I do now. If I come across anything, I don't perhaps go into my shell, but I definitely can do more to speak out, and I have done now. But as a kid, my defense mechanism was just go into my shell and don't say anything.
And that was how it impacted you.
Yeah, definitely. I think more happened up in here, and I still suffer from that. Is I really struggle to talk about things when it comes to like the way I'm feeling or what I'm going through. I want if you're going to talk about my biggest weakness, that is my biggest weakness, because the people around me can see that there's something wrong, and I struggle to verbalize that by conversation. That's why I have notebooks. Like, this is my journal, and this is why I write down what's like every morning. I write down what the thoughts that I wake up with. It's utter rubbish, and I never read it back. Like, I never read back what I've written, because it's probably just verbatim that no one wants to read. But for me, it's an opportunity to get those words out of my head that I can't out of my mouth. So I think I would encourage people to find whatever that might be, whatever medium that is for you, is try and find a way to get your thoughts out your head, because they can be very damaging if you don't.
It's the internal dialogue, isn't it? It's that inner voice that basically tells you, because it protects you through a negative stand.
Yeah.
Saying that, look, you know, out of fear, in the sense that it doesn't want you to get hurt. But what it does actually, it actually prevents you from taking action and moving forward. It's interesting. You know, I was going to ask you, what do you fear? Because you've gone through quite a hefty childhood. I mean, you know, in school, obviously, it made impacts on you. What is it that you fear?
Good question. At this moment, it's not reaching my full potential. I think from everything that I read, from everything, the conversations that I have, and from my own goals, my biggest fear is not reaching the potential that I've set for myself in my own head. Now, the way that manifests that self is an action most of the time. And my biggest goal is trying to do as much as I can with the time that I have and the opportunities that I have with me. Now, my fire, I think, which is parallel to my why. Like, I think the why and the fire, they're conducive to one another, because without that why and without that fire, I think the why sometimes is subdued. And I think setting that lofty goal, you always have to be accountable to that. And how you're accountable to that is the actions that you take. Now, I'm very aware that I'm starting to verbalize this more with my followers and on video. So that makes this even more I don't want to call it a challenge, because I feel like whether it happens or it doesn't happen, I think that shouldn't take away from the fact of working towards it. But it is I don't care if it doesn't happen. Like, that fear is not, like, for me, like, I don't care if it happens or it doesn't happen. But I think the fear for me comes with not doing it, or even trying it, because I'm very fortunate to have, you know, a degree, and I'm working towards a professional qualification. So if anything ever happens, I could always fall back on it. So in my mind, like, there's absolutely nothing I can lose in the situation. So that's why, for me, I feel like everything's working towards it, like, at this moment. So my fear is I'm not doing as much as I can on a day-to-day basis. Now, I have this goal in 5 to 10 years. Now, I can think about the goal in 5 to 10 years, but if I'm not doing everything that I can do on a daily basis to get to it, there's no point even thinking about it. So my greatest fear is, every single day, am I doing as much as I can? That's it. Like, I try and keep it as simple as that, because you start thinking 6 months, a year down the road, and sometimes you get overwhelmed. And I've done this. And this is why I struggle with goals. Like, people like you have to write down your goals. And I remember reading listening to a very interesting video by Tim Ferriss. And he talks about not listing your goals, but listing your fears. If you want to go back into the fear, is listing your fears rather than your goals. So what is your fear? Because your fears drive your goals at the end of the day. So list out your fears. What are your fears? And that will drive the action that you need to take going forward. If anyone doesn't know who Tim Ferriss is, go check out Tim Ferriss. He's written many good books and does great videos. That one stuck out with me. It was, what am I fearing? Like, what is my fear? And I have thought about this in depth. Like, I've asked myself this question a lot, and I do write about this a lot in my journal, is what is the Aun of 10 to 15 years gonna think of the Aun today? Like, I think about this a lot, and it goes back to that feeling of treating I had this kind of eureka moment, I want to say 2 to 3 years ago, was taking yourself out of yourself and treating yourself as a third party. Like, what if you were giving advice to yourself, how would you tell yourself to act in this certain situation? Because it's very easy as the individual to get caught up in their own mind. So how can I act as a video game player in my own mind and take the right steps? Because it's a very difficult thing to do. And for me, it always goes back to the fact of not reaching that potential or that goal that I've set myself, whatever that might be. And I think having goals is a great thing. Having lofty goals is a great thing. But the things you do on the day to day is more important for me than having that lofty goal, because goals change. Like, I could start this, and 2 to 3 years, the whole dynamic could change. Like, I might not have a publishing company. I might go down the influencer route, or I might, just go into interviewing. I might get broadcast as part of a channel, and then now I just do I do tech, whatever that might be. So I don't know where it goes, but if I'm doing as much as I can on a day-to-day basis to put myself in position. Now, having experiences like yesterday with Robin Sharma for me is a affirmation of the things that I'm doing. So at times where I feel like it's not going anywhere, because regardless of how many followers you have, there's always that fear that you're not doing enough, and you're not growing is growing is growing. But I'm much more focused on engagement at the moment than perhaps likes and views. Is how am I engaging with the people around me? Because people are people, whether it's on social media, whether it's the conversation that we're having right now. People are people, and we're social beings. So how am I having as many conversations as I can on the topics that I want to talk about? Because I've learned more. I want to say learned more. I've learned as much from the books that I've read, from the conversations that I've had with people on the messaging. Like if you go into my comments, sometimes, the comments are that long. And there's like 8 chats on the same person, and they're like that long. Like having those conversations is so important.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I just want to go back to this I want to mention to you. It's Simon Sinek's quote, going back to the why. People don't buy, as in purchase, buy what you do. They buy why you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's classic Simon Sinek, isn't it? And he expresses it so well, doesn't he?
Yeah, precisely. And he gets a lot of the bookstagrammers don't particularly like his material because they feel like it's oversimplified. Now, I feel like that's a bit pretentious, but whatever someone's personal opinion is, it's making it accessible to all people. Like his message is simplistic to a degree, and he is quite repetitive in the book, but that doesn't take away from the message itself. And that quote is obviously a great quote, and I think it's something that whether you're Jeff Bezos or whether you're just starting out, you need to ask yourself that question. Yeah. And I ask myself the question all the time, because if you're not asking yourself that question, in my mind, you're just wasting your time. Because if you don't know why you're doing it, then why are you doing it? And I put out 5 points that I learned from the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins today. And the 5th one was know why you're doing it. Like if you're doing something, if you can't answer the question why you're doing it, then the chances are it's not good for you. So
or it's wrong for you.
Yeah, or it's wrong for you. Yeah, whether it's good or wrong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's something that I do now as well. Am what I doing beneficial to me in 5 to 10 years? Because yes, it could be beneficial for you for a week, but once that week's over, has that time been productive towards getting to that 5 to 10 years? And that's something that I'd always obviously have that trade-off in my mind.
Who's your role model?
Good question. No one in particular. I don't. People have people who they want to be. Like, I don't want to be anyone that I see. I want to be me, but I want to be the best version of me. Like I've never, and still as a kid, I was never jealous of anyone. I was never, I want to be that guy. I want to be, I'm passionate about my sport and golf in particular. Like I've never wanted to be like, oh, I wish I was Tiger Woods, or I wish I was Phil Mickelson, I wish I was Rory. Like, no, they're their own individual people. I wish to be in a position where I'm living to the potential that they are. That's my role model. It's myself to their potential. And that has always been my goal. Is like, I've never wanted to be any other person but myself, but I've wanted to be the best version of myself. So that's my role model. Going back to what I said earlier is about, I want to be the person in 5 to 10 years that I see now as being that person. Like I have a very clear image of the person that I want to be in 5 to 10 years, and just working towards that, whether that comes to fruition or not, but at least I can live with the fact of whatever happens.
How I mean, it's interesting you say that. I'm going to flip it now. How do you feel that potentially you are a role model to your followers?
That's a very weird feeling. Even you saying that, it's weird, because people trust what I say and they take my recommendations to heart. Like I'm getting a lot more.
Do you feel pressure?
That's a good question. I think I feel pressure from myself more than them. And let me expand on this a bit more. I feel pressure from myself because I don't want to come across fake, or I don't want to come across as if I'm not genuine to what I'm talking about, or I don't want to come across that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm just saying things because I feel like I want to say them, you know? And that's where the pressure comes from me internally. Whether someone reads a book or not, that's up to them. But for me, is if my message is on point and I've come from the right place and the intention is correct, then I can go to sleep knowing that I haven't tricked someone or told them false information or just said something to them because it was flippant and I don't really care. Like, for instance, I get a lot of messages in different languages. So I get messages in Arabic that are written in Arabic or Spanish. And I take the time to go onto Google Translate and copy and paste them back and forwards in their own language. Now, I do that purely because I know that those individuals are seeking something that they can't get from someone else around them. Now, I'm very empathetic to that. I'm very empathetic to the fact that someone is living in an environment that they don't have access to information or people that are like-minded to them. Now, I take that very personally as something that I need to do. If someone's reaching out to me and communicating with me, it is my responsibility to get back to them, regardless of what they're asking from me. And if it's in a different language, like I have a friend called Mateus, and his English isn't great, and he always messaged me in Spanish, but I always message him back in Spanish. Like I remember having a conversation with him over Instagram once, and it went on for about an hour and a half because I spent most of the time going onto my phone, and this was in the comments section, so you can't copy and paste the comment. So I had to go onto my computer, type in into Spanish into English, get the translation, copy and paste it into my notes on my computer, so it came onto my phone, so I can copy and paste them and copy and paste it back into the comments. So for me, it's about the pressure is, am I putting the best version out there of myself to my followers? It's not about, am I making myself look like I am like the lord of all information and people should come to me to get all the information? No, like you can go to wherever you want to get your information. But if you want someone you want to listen to someone who is genuinely saying the things that he believes to be true, then that's what I aspire to be. And that's where the pressure comes from me. It doesn't come from other people. Well, it does come from other people because obviously they're listening to me, but the pressure comes internally because I want to make sure that the message that I put out, I believe in, because it has to start. If I don't believe in what I'm talking about, then it's not going to come across genuine to anyone else. So that's my main thing. That's my main goal.
Yeah, that's, to me, that sounds like integrity, real deep integrity. It's a bit like, you know, and I have, it's a lot of people, I guess, come on the internet and they get, the initial intention may not be this, but they get washed away with looking good or wanting to look good. And what happens is that the outside, it becomes different to the inside. And I think, you know, you seem to have very good handle of, you know, that self-awareness piece comes in again, doesn't it?
I personally, to elaborate now, need to do a better job maybe of showing people the other side of what I do. Because everyone obviously sees like the videos that I put out and the conversations I have. And I have dabbled in vlogs a bit, behind the scene vlogs and all that kind of stuff, but I definitely need to do a better job of showing people perhaps what it takes to do the stuff that I'm doing, and showing people that yes, some days you'll have to get up at 4:30 in the morning and you'll have to do 2.5 hours of work before you go to work. And sometimes you have to, you know, stay up until, you know, 11 and reply for 2.5 hours. Like the other day I spent pretty much 2.5 hours straight replying to people's messages. Now, someone's online on Instagram and you have 50 messages to reply to back to them, but they want to have a conversation with you. You can't leave that conversation. Like someone's having a conversation. It's like me and you having a conversation. Someone else replies to me and I just go over and talk to that person and completely ignore you. Like no one's going to do that unless you're completely socially inept. You're not going to do that in person. So why do people expect to do that on social media? Like someone is there in present having a conversation with you. Why are you not engaging with them as much as you can? Yes, obviously, someone might listen to the be like, Aun hasn't replied to my message. Yes, maybe not immediately, because hopefully they have the awareness to know that there's other people and there's quite a lot going on. But I do my best to make sure if someone is reaching out to me, I reach back to them as soon as I can, because that is all I. It's not all I have, but that is why I do it, because I want to make sure that the people that I'm reaching out to feel as if they are leaving the conversation either with the answer that they're looking for or with that spark to then go do something. If a conversation fizzles out and they haven't left that thank you or thank you for taking the time, I feel like I haven't done enough for them to, in whatever that might be. And that's why how I try and leave every conversation with, it's like thank you or you're welcome or whatever that might be, and or leave a conversation, a channel open for conversation in the future. Because I get regular people who comment on my stuff and send me messages and engage in conversations, and I try and encourage conversations. For instance, I've messaged someone to just now that I haven't heard from in a couple of weeks, and I just asked him if he was okay, because the way I see it, it's not just about being this person who gets likes and follows and comments in the page, because I get as many comments as I get in the comment section on my posts that I do in my DMs. I can't prioritize what people see from, because people don't see the work, because I think a lot of people don't understand that a lot of work goes on behind the scenes in replying to people. It's not just what happens in the feed. All they see is what happens in the feed. And there is so much time spent replying to people, and you have to love it. Like, that's what I would say to anyone is you have to love engaging with people and spending time talking to people, because if you don't love that part of it, it gets very, very
and you have to be
overwhelming. Yeah, I think that if you want to talk about strengths, that's always been one of my strengths. I think I don't know where it's come from, but I think definitely growing up has been a big part of that and what I've gone through. But that is definitely my biggest strength, is I've always been a very patient person. And I'm willing to wait 20 years, 30 years for whatever for what I've just talked about to happen. Like I'm in no rush whatsoever. And that's not because I don't want to do it, because if I did have the opportunity, I'll do it tomorrow. But it's more the fact that, do I have the necessary skills now to do it? No, I don't believe I have the necessary skills right now to do what I want to do to the best of my ability. Now, I see it as a way of, you only want to do something, this is the way I see it, this is my personal opinion, you only want to do something if you have the necessary skills to do it at that moment in time. Now, I don't feel like I have the necessary skills. So I will make sure that I have that before I go and embark on anything that I want to do. So, yeah.
Okay. And I think, you clearly have a lot of responsibility, and I look at, your followers on Instagram as your family. You have obviously your family, but they are also, in quotation marks, your responsibility, because you're putting out content.
I treat them as like OMBR Club. Like I created OMBR Club a couple of weeks ago. It's like my email newsletter that I started to roll out, and I treat it as a club/family. Like if someone replies to me and takes the time, because people have replied to my email that I sent out and they send me an email back, I treat them as if they're my extended family, because they take the time and effort to reply to my comments. They take the time and to watch my videos. It's as if they're part of my family that spends that time to engage with me. Yes, they might not be my close family, obviously, but they engage with me, and they talk to me maybe more than my family do at times. And I treat them very much the same way. Like I treat them with respect. If they leave a comment, I always tell them, thank you for your comment, thank you for your message, thank you for taking the time. Just because it's on social media doesn't mean they're not real people. And I've always had that in the back of my mind. And I think it's a big factor in perhaps why I've grown in a certain way, is I've always come with that mindset and humility from the fact that they are people and you need to treat them like people, and you need to be respectful, and you need to give them the information and the value in such a way that they come across inspired in a way to go and read, because that's all I see myself as, is the starter to them, you know, just reading and engaging more.
Yeah, and you know, I was going to go on to saying that clearly, you know, your time is precious. It requires a discipline, doesn't it, to manage it all? You talked about discipline because you've actually posted something about discipline.
Yeah, I always go back to the quote by Jocko Willink in his book Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink was a Navy SEAL, and he has his famous tagline called "Discipline equals freedom." And ever since I read that book, I've always been like, there's something about Navy SEALs. Yes, that you've got some that are just a bit crazy and they're just, you know, a bit off the chain. But you have others that are like, yes, like whatever you've gone through in your training, that's done you a world of good. And I try and learn as much as I can from people with different experiences. And the thing that I've taken from him is you have to be disciplined, like whatever that might be. And it's something that I work towards as much as I can, to be as disciplined as I can, whatever that might be, whether it comes to my study, whether it comes to my job, whether it comes to the book stuff that I do. And it goes back to the day-to-day stuff. Like, am I doing what I can do on a daily basis to put myself in that position? And discipline is the foundation for that, whatever discipline that has. And it changes in each individual. Like, for instance, people say to me, is like, how do I find more time to read? I'm like, well, I always start with find something that you're interested in reading. Like, don't go and read Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, and that's translated straight from Latin, and it's a book on philosophy. That's a letters to his student Lucilius. That's not gonna, read a commentary if you want to read something like that, or read something that's an introductory book. Don't go straight into something that's way too complicated, because you'll get bored. I mean, what's the point? Yeah. It's not supposed to overwhelm you. It's supposed to be a vehicle for further learning. And very rarely do I read a book and I'm like, that's completely changed my mind. It's a foundation. Like, you read one, you read another, there's good points, there's bad points. It starts pieced together and becomes you form a better understanding of yourself and the way that you operate. I forgot the question you were asking.
No, it is about the discipline.
Yes, the discipline. I think a lot of people struggle with that, and I always encourage, if we're going to go back to some books that I've read, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about 1% better a day. Just do something for 5 minutes. If you want to get into reading, read for 5 minutes, read 5 pages for a week, but then put it down after 5. And then just be like, okay, I'm going to do that the next day. And then after a couple of weeks, you do 10 pages. And then you do 10 pages. And then a couple of weeks later, you do 20 pages a day. Like, it's not a race. Like, who are you racing against? Because someone came back to me and he said, look, one day I read 200 pages in the day, but then I didn't read for 2 months. I'm like, well, if you read 10 pages a day for 20 days, you would have got the same position. Like, just break it down to the most simple facts and then do that. And my opinion of it is, like, at the moment, we can't go out and go to the gym, for instance, because we're in quarantine. Like, what do we do? Like, for me, it's make the most of what you have. You know, you have a garden, you have some bands, just go do something, or go for a run for 20 minutes. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, like you're squatting like 110 kilos or something. Just do the best that you can with the situation that you have. Like, I think when I started the channel, I wanted to have like the perfect equipment. I wanted to have like the perfect setup. I want to have the perfect lighting. I want everything to be like the most perfect, the way it looked. And I had this realization. I was like, oh, who cares? Just do it. Just put it out there and see what happens. So
yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect.
I think being genuine to yourself and having that discipline is way more important, because I've seen people who put out videos and they look perfect, but they look too perfect. Like, where's the personality? And I think something that I perhaps didn't get across so well at the start was my own personality, but I'm starting in this more long form of content, I think, starting to get my personality out there a bit more that I didn't in the past.
And I hope something like this will also sort of positively expose you in terms of your readers and your followers to be able to understand.
Yeah, I think I probably haven't done a good enough job to maybe explain what my why is, what my purpose is, but I think it's perhaps in its infancy a bit too much maybe to state that. But hopefully they get an idea of what I'm working towards. They obviously don't know. I've never really talked about the publishing stuff, or because it's not really like, who cares? Like it's not their they're not employees of mine. Like they don't have to seek my vision, obviously. I mean, they do listen to me, so it'd be nice for them to know, but I don't harp on about it because they want, essentially, they just want to know the best books to read.
Yeah.
Granular level.
What is the best book you've read? What is your favorite book?
I get this question all the time. See, it depends. It depends where my mind is and what I'm focusing on. And I have 3 books that I always go back to. The first is the one I showed you earlier, which was 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. I think this book, for me, when I've read it, I want to say I've read it 3 times, and I've listened to the audiobook, I want to say another 4 times. So this book I always go back to if I'm looking for something which has philosophy, has science, has some theology to it, but he's a trained psychologist, and for me it's one of those books where it completely changed my idea of personal growth and how to achieve a more polished and determined version of yourself, which I didn't have prior to reading it. So I would encourage 12 Rules of Life by Jordan B. Peterson. The other book was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I think his story is an amazing story. Navy SEAL, went through way of a more difficult childhood than anyone I've ever read before, came out of it, was a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger training, and now an ultramarathon runner. Had a hole in his heart that he didn't even know about, did all that stuff with a hole in his heart, and yeah, it's a crazy story. And same, I've read that one multiple times. And the other one is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I would say my favorite author is Ryan Holiday. Big onto Stoicism, the ancient Roman philosophy of Stoicism. And in the book Obstacle is the Way, he talks about tactics and strategies based on philosophies of ancient Stoic philosophers and their ways of approaching dealing with obstacles. And I always fall back on those 3, as if anyone asks me for recommendations, I usually recommend at least one of those 3 books, because they're always the books that stick into my mind. Now, there's books that are offshoot off that, and I could go for an hour talking about the books that I think are great. But those 3 for me, I felt like were turning points that I felt different towards myself after reading it, and books that I always go back to. I think if there's books that you always go back to, I think that you've come across a good book for you, because it depends on the individual. But I always get positive messages from people who have read the books that I've suggested. Like, I've got a message from someone saying they've read 12 Rules for Life after my recommendation, and it's the best book they've ever read. So for me, that means like I feel my recommendation came from a genuine place, and then his reading came from a genuine place, and then he felt like that was his favorite book he's ever read. Like, for me, like, that is why I do it. There's no other reason than someone coming to me and saying, look, I read one of the books you recommended and it was the best book I've ever read. I'm like, there's no other way that you can top that for me. Like, that is the best feeling. Maybe a message from Robin Sharma, but apart from that.
Audible or reading? Physical reading?
Both.
Both.
I believe they supplement one another.
Okay.
I think with all the 3 books that I just said, my top 3 books, I got them an audiobook before I read the physical book.
Okay, yes.
And I think they supplement one another. And I think that people should use them not as comparisons, but as supplements. See, if, for instance, you're reading a book on habit formation, and you're reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and you're reading that as the hard copy. Now, you could go in the car, you could go for runs, you could go to the gym, you could be around the house, and you can listen to The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Now, I encourage people to read different books on the same topic, because you get the good points and the bad points about certain books, and you can compare philosophies and ideas that people have on certain topics, because then you can get what's positive and negative about each author, and you might align to a certain way of speaking and narrative to one author and not to another. But I use them. I don't say to people like one's better than the other, because I use audiobooks as much as I do use, the physical copies. So I don't have a quote unquote preference. I think there's just a time and a place for each one. Ebooks I don't do, really, to be fair. I don't like reading off a screen, but I do like listening to it, and I do like reading the physical copy because I like taking notes in the book and I like highlighting a lot. I think I get a lot of questions from people saying they struggle to remember the things that they've read, and I always encourage people to have their highlighter, have their pen, have their book, and have their notebook, and just go to town. Like a book is not something. It's not an ornament. It's a physical document that you need to spend time with. Like, it's not something that should just sit on your shelf and be an ornament to your furniture. It's not like a chair. It's not like a fancy coffee table. You have to get like down and dirty with the book and really spend time in it and write in it and highlight it and question it. And is this right? Is this wrong? Is what he's talking about correct? Like, just use it as a vehicle to understand more, not just as an ornament for your life. Like, I think a lot of people just kind of see books and like, I want to have a large library, or like, I want to buy more books. And I'm like, well, why? Because I feel like reading more books is a good thing, but I think also on the flip side of that is, if you're reading a book a day, I'm like, how much are you actually learning from the book that you're reading? Because people always ask me, like, how can I read faster? I'm like, that's the wrong way to approach it. Like, you should be asking, how can I implement the things that I'm reading better? And for me, that's reading multiple books on the same topic from different authors. And it's also like writing down your thoughts on the book as you go through it, because it ingrains the thoughts in your mind. And I've read, for instance, let's say 12 Rules for Life multiple times, and I've got different things at different times of reading it because of where my mind was at during the period in time which I read it. So that plays a massive role in it as well. Like, perspective on a certain topic plays a massive role in it. So let's say if I've read a book and I'm not really connecting with it, I'll maybe put it down and start another book, but I will come back to the other one in time because I might have a different perspective to it than before. So I would say those are my three, on a massive tangent, but those I'd say with my three favorite books that I always recommend to people, because having a favorite is having a favorite, but I think the ones that you recommend to people are automatically your favorites because you're putting trust in your recommendation. And yeah, those three I would say is, I can go on a massive tangent about other books, but I think for me personally, they've had the greatest impact on me.
Yeah, books are which you really don't get, holding a book and actually reading it, as opposed to sort of listening to it. It's a very different experience.
I actually find with books that talk about stories and personal experiences, audiobooks I find a lot more helpful.
Okay.
Because I feel like you're experiencing it with them. Like, I wouldn't read a technical book. Let's say if I'm reading like Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, the audiobook would be great, but I kind of want to be in the book, or a book on philosophy. Like, I kind of want to be like deep philosophy. Like, if you want to go into like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, like, you want to get in the book and feel it and get into it. But if you're reading a book, let's say like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, it's a story and it's a great story, and you can kind of feel the story as you're listening to it, and especially if they're the one who's narrated it, you can kind of get the idea and experiencing with them, and there's a different feel to it. Like with Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, he did something that no one's ever done before, because he was an audiobook, but it was a podcast. So after every chapter they had a discussion about and he gave like bits in the book that was in the book, and he elaborated, and you get a different feeling from the book. It's not just the physical copy of words that you get. And I think that's why audiobooks play a really important role, because you get a different feeling if it's read from the author.
Interesting. We're looking to sign off. So I usually ask this as we're sort of tailing off. If there's is there anything that you want to say to contribute to the listeners in terms of, as a summary, because we've been now at this about hour and 25 minutes.
Have we? That's gone quickly.
Yeah. So is there anything that you want to say?
Put me on the spot. I would say to people is spend time trying to understand who you are as a person. I think everyone has people around them, or society in general, trying to tell them who they should be, or who they are supposed to be. And really spend time in your mind and reading and noting down and writing your thoughts to try and understand who you are, and as a result you try and figure out who you want to become. I think a lot of people look at external people and to try and determine where they want to go, but I'm a true believer in the fact that you already know who you want to become. You just have to mine it out of you, and you have to spend time with yourself to try and find that who that is. And I want to leave on a note where people think that accumulating knowledge is reading other books and obviously learning from people around you, which is great. But the way I see knowledge, and I can't remember who I got this from, was you're mining the information. Like it's a mining exercise rather than a grabbing exercise. You are picking away at your initial thoughts and ideas, and you're finding diamonds in the rough that you can come and put into your backpack for life, and help you navigate through life in a way that is conducive to what you want to do, instead of just taking on information that might be subjective at times and not beneficial to you. So really spend time with yourself to try and understand the way in which you operate as a person, to understand where you want to go. That's what I'd really encourage people. Spend time, as much time as you can, by yourself, obviously without feeling lonely. And quarantine's a great time for that. Like, yeah, it's a great time to really spend time, reading more, understanding yourself more. And I think I talked about this with Lucy a couple of days ago, is I think quarantine has opened the eyes of many people who feel like they have to spend their times around other people. I think people will come out the other side of this feeling that, oh, maybe I didn't need to spend that time with that person because I feel perfectly fine without them. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be social. It's the fact that maybe people spend too much time seeking validation from other people that perhaps they don't need to. And I have always benefited from staying within myself and within my own thoughts as much as I can. I'm obviously open to criticism as much as I can, or feedback, but I trust my instincts and I trust my thoughts. And I think that's because I've spent so much time asking myself difficult questions about myself. So I'd really encourage people to ask themselves difficult questions about themselves, because you find out so much about yourself that you wouldn't if you didn't ask those questions.
That's really interesting. And I just want to sort of summarize and finish off by sort of, I guess, giving you a summary of, my perception of this discussion and this interview. I think you're a very thoughtful guy, by the way. I think that you have come through quite a lot, especially in the early years. Yeah. I think you speak beautifully.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any kind of difficulty in public speaking, so to speak. So I think you do it really well. Don't see any dyslexia, to be honest with you. But here's the thing. I want to just quickly relate to you in the things that you have pointed out. So I suffer from anxiety. I have suffered for quite a long time. Loss of breath, for example, and it still happens. I'm 54 and I still get it. For me to do this, what I'm doing, it's taken me a long time to get to where I am now. And you're my third episode. You're my third guest. Sort of loss of my voice, as you had pointed out. Education was very difficult, like yourself. My teachers actually used to compare me to my older brother, which was a big problem. And
I know how that is.
And at that time, going back a long way, they used to plaster our results on the board for everyone to see. And I was lo and behold, at the bottom of the list. So everyone can see that. So those are things that really impact you as you grow up.
Yeah.
But what I do want to say before we say goodbye is that to the listeners is that Aun actually is my nephew, my sister's son, and I'm his uncle. And it has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, there are things that you have said to me that, I've watched you grow up, and you're a young man, and you're an incredible young man. And I'm not saying that because you're my nephew. I'm saying that because you are an incredible human being that's sitting in front of me.
Thank you very much.
I thank you for the time that you've given me. I'm really, really grateful to you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been great fun.
Yeah.
Having this conversation, this format.
Yeah.
I think it's been.
I've really loved it. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is when we air it, all of Aun's details will be on the post, and by all means, get in touch with him. He's an awesome guy. Not only because he's my nephew, but he is an awesome guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much. Signing off. Stay safe. Wash those hands.
Yes.
And,
thank you, everyone.
Enjoy.